Emergency operations. Things that everyone knows about, but nobody wants to endure, and certainly nobody wants to pay for. In this case, I'm talking mostly about emergency surgeries, which is defined by the European Union of Medical Specialists, or the Union Européenne des Médecins Spécialisés, as, quote, surgery that is required to deal with an acute life threat. But what are the most common emergency surgeries? Or the most expensive? The most dangerous? How many people actually have emergency surgery? And what are some of the most obscure or even most important cases of emergency surgery history? Surprisingly, just 7 different operations account for nearly 80% of all emergency surgeries performed. These include exploratory laparotomy, appendectomy, lysis of adhesions, ulcer surgery, specifically stomach ulcer surgery, cholecystectomy, small bowel recession, and partial colectomy. Of all these operations, the deadliest is an exploratory abdominal surgery, but it's important to note this is only the case when the cause can't be easily identified. In cases like these, the mortality rate is as high as 23.2%, and the complication rate as high as 40.2%. These numbers lower dramatically when a cause is identified, however, because once the problem is known, it's obviously much easier to solve the problem. The surgery with the lowest rate of mortality is the appendectomy, or taking out the appendix, which actually has a reported mortality rate as low as 0.08%. Its complication rate isn't quite as low, being around 7.3%, but nonetheless, the appendectomy is quite survivable in most situations. The most expensive of these operations is actually the small bowel recession, which comes in at a price of $28,450. And the cheapest is actually the appendectomy, which costs just around the amount of a used car at $9,664. At least to me, it's no surprise that the appendectomy is not only the safest, but the cheapest surgery, because it's been performed so many times throughout the entire nation. I'm sure most people watching this know someone or know someone who has had an appendectomy. Most people say that the only purpose of the appendix in the modern age is actually just to pay doctors, and depends on your viewpoint, but it doesn't do much else. Nobody cares if you're a storehouse for good bacteria. What is that even supposed to mean? Fun fact, Markiplier actually had an appendectomy, which is what he talks about in this video where he's seen in the hospital. He survived, so you should be okay. So we know the most common emergency procedures performed in the US, but how many people do these stats apply to? Well, unfortunately, I was not able to find specific numbers for trauma operations, but it's estimated that of all surgical procedures performed, 11% of them have to do with emergencies. The annual toll of emergency procedures, including when they unfortunately fail, is around $4.2 trillion. This number is so high because it takes into account the value of life and quality of life lost in emergency procedures. Trauma is also the leading cause of death for people under the age of 45, making up around 47% of deaths. Many of these deaths, unfortunately, occur before patients can be operated on. But why are these numbers so high? Well, it ultimately comes down to the cases of trauma, specifically when the mortality rate is higher. Attempted homicides, suicides, or unintentional injuries such as MVCs account for 24% of emergency-related deaths. This doesn't necessarily mean emergency surgery death, as many of these could be aided by surgery and that they perhaps didn't receive. Well, I realize it's getting a little depressing on that topic, isn't it? Did you know that President Garfield was almost saved from his assassination by practices of emergency surgery? When he was shot on July 2nd, 1881, he actually lived for around 2 months during a lengthy process of operations. The main problem? They weren't able to find the bullet. Even Alexander Graham Bell created a new technology to try and listen for the bullet, which is called this. I don't have it listed, but that's what it's called. Unfortunately, this didn't help, and the bullet still wasn't found until his autopsy. It's said that a similar case would be very survivable today, especially considering advances in imaging technology, such as X-rays, which would easily allow for the bullet to be seen, as you can see it on this X-ray right here. There have been many accounts of prehistoric cranial surgeries that were performed to relieve illnesses like infections, fractures, or headaches. You know, the most common deadly illness. These surgeries used precision tools such as hand drill or scraping tool. Some may say that these aren't emergency surgeries, but I can't help but picture a situation of a caveman with a headache, so he asked his friend to just cut open his skull for him. Thankfully, today we have the wonders of modern medicine that help us with emergency situations like the ones discussed. Emergency surgeons and emergency medicine physicians go to school for many, many years in order to be on the sometimes literal cutting edge of innovations in treatment and personal patient care. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you'll need an emergency surgery, you are in the best hands possible, and that your providers will do everything in their power to help you. And with that, I'm going to end the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is a series that I hope to continue, so if you have any medical-related topics you want to learn more about, please list them in the comments. I know that some of the information here may not have been surprising, but ultimately, down the line, I want to supply content that can teach people about interesting things in medicine. I want to state as well that I am absolutely not giving medical advice, nor am I trying to impersonate a medical provider. I'm simply a student who has an interest in different aspects of medicine, and this video was made for entertainment of audiences only. Please consider subscribing if you want to keep watching the series, or like the video to promote it so that someone else can enjoy it. All of my resources are linked in the video description and in the footnotes located throughout the video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in part 2 coming very soon.